Hey guys, so today I am going to cover a very important topic to all of us, and that is periods and how it can impact your weight loss progress. So, first things first, it's important to say that your period itself doesn't directly impact your fat loss progress. And I know sometimes that feels a little bit unbelievable because we see our weight shoot up and it feels like people feel fat in inverted commas and you're more bloated and watery and you don't notice, you don't feel as lean. So it does sometimes feel like it actually does impact your fat loss progress, but it doesn't. How you respond to how your period makes you feel is what has an impact on your progress. So, the main things that can help you navigate this is obviously accepting what's happening, rationalizing it from a scientific perspective, and obviously giving yourself self-compassion. And all of these things I'm going to go through. So the first thing is hunger levels. Now, this happens to a majority of people. It doesn't happen to everyone. It's really dependent on what type of contraception you're on. So typically people that are on the pill, because it's not an actual period, they might not find that hunger levels change around their periods. However, they may have noticed that hunger levels changed when they started taking the pill. So there is sort of that to factor in as well. Generally, if you have what is described as an artificial period, which is like hormonally charged, as in like synthetic hormonally charged period, sometimes symptoms aren't quite as bad. Obviously, people who don't get periods at all, i.e. back-to-back pills, or they have the hormonal coil that prevents their periods, may not really notice changes either. But essentially what happens when you're on a period and a natural period, your BMR, which is how many calories you burn a day, can increase by 150 to 200 calories a day. So as a result, you might get hungrier. Not everyone does, but you might. But essentially what happens is, because you're trying to lose weight and you're hormonal, you basically hate your body more than you do usually. Because, I'm not saying everyone who wants to lose weight hates their body, but if you are trying to lose weight, you're trying to change something about your body, so you might not feel that comfortable with it. So you have that, plus the layer of being hormonal as well. And because you're desperate to make progress, you kind of refuse to acknowledge or sensibly honour your increased hunger when it happens. So essentially what happens is you end up overeating later because you feel like a bottomless pit, because you haven't honoured your hunger levels, and that can lead into, a self-sabotage spiral of guilt. So what can you do? So a lot of people that I coach will have a calorie range. This is the perfect time to use that calorie range, giving yourself an extra 100 to 200 calories a day with that calorie range, or you could just allow yourself an additional 100 to 200 calories a day if you're tracking. Across the week, is it going to take you out of a calorie deficit? No. What is going to take you out of a calorie deficit is overeating and then self-sabotaging for a week. Ensure your meals are satisfying and high volume. Now, satisfying means you might want to change the types of food you're eating to suit your emotions. So for instance, in winter, we all want comfort food. Generally, when we're on our periods, we want comfort food. So obviously, a Caesar salad is not going to satisfy you in the same way as a chicken casserole is. And equally, things for breakfast, if you do have more sweet cravings, then you may want to opt for more sweet breakfasts, throughout the week. So ensuring that your meals are satisfying in terms of what you are what you are fancying on that day, and also high volume, i.e. big volume is going to keep you full and is probably going to help you feel a lot more satiated, which means you're probably going to be less likely to overeat and feel less hungry. And kind of linking into what I meant about changing how your meals are satisfying on a daily basis and what satisfying actually means for you on a daily basis, factor in more of what you want to eat. You don't always have to stick to the 80-20 rule. And I would probably say when you're on your period, if it goes to 60-40 in terms of 60% nutritious, 40% non-nutritious rather than 80% nutritious, that's fine, because ultimately at the end of the day, what matters the most is how many calories you're consuming if you want to make weight loss progress. if you are making up those calories with maybe an extra 200 calories of snacks a day, obviously making up all of your food with chocolate and, you know, calorie dense snacks is going to add to your hunger levels. It's going to make you more hungry. But if you typically have like 200 calories of snacks a day and you take that up to 400 calories, that's not a big deal. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's not going to be a permanent fixture, and you don't need to feel bad for eating unhealthy foods, because eating an unhealthy food item doesn't then make you unhealthy, and eating something that's high calorie doesn't then make you fat. Like, it doesn't work like that. It has to be, you know, consistently doing that over a long period of time. So, yeah, and a lot of this is kind of like being kind to yourself. A lot of us feel a lot of feel bad when we eat certain types of food, and the more you eat them and realize that nothing bad is going to happen, and the more you give yourself permission to do that, the less guilty you'll feel for doing it. But essentially, like, if you know you're going to be hungrier, then it absolutely makes sense to eat more. And if you know you're going to have more cravings, it makes sense to honour those cravings, but still control how many calories you're having at the end of the day, because you can do both. Okay, training considerations. So around your period, usually just before or the first couple of days, you will feel increased levels of fatigue, and that is even if your sleep doesn't suffer, which I will come on to. But because you're trying to lose weight and you feel guilty, like, you know, for not adhering to the process, you refuse to take an extra rest day, which means the training sessions that you do manage feel shit, and as a result, you feel like you're not making any progress, and your mood and body image are now taking a week-long holiday in O Beach with Wayne and Lineker being touched up. So essentially, I'm going to go on to this little diagram that I did in March 2022 about training and training considerations around your period. So these are like the different phases of your cycle, and these are like the typical symptoms that you'll probably find. So around your period, which is your menses, which I really object to being called menses, it should be called womenses. You're going to have more inflammation in your joints, your muscles. Obviously, that is further highlighted by the fact that you're going to be retaining more water. Strength is going to be lower, and you're actually at a higher risk of injury. So really pushing yourself in your training on your period is probably one of the worst things you can do in terms of, like, you know, basically giving yourself an injury. Post-period, obviously your energy levels are going to have recovered their equilibrium. Strength training is going to be more effective. Carbohydrate storage is inhibited. That doesn't mean anything bad. It just means that your insulin sensitivity is slightly different, but it's not going to make you gain fat. Doesn't do anything. It might just mean that you don't still have as much energy going into your sessions because your body isn't necessarily storing the carbohydrates from the food that you're eating effectively. Ovulation, this is like the best time to train. Maximum strength, smash PBs. That should actually say lower risk of injury. But obviously if you're pushing for PBs, you are then at a higher risk of injury, so it kind of cancels each other out. But this is like the best time to absolutely smash training. And then luteal phase, again, sometimes these two kind of like seep into each other. Sometimes people feel worse in the luteal phase, which is like the PMS phase, and feel okay with training during their period, and some people don't feel so bad during their like PMS phase and then feel worse with training. So these two kind of like interlink, but again, like PMS phase, you're going to be retaining a bit more water, motivation is going to start to dip, it's harder to focus. It's probably around like, you know, day 27 to day 2 or 3 of period. That's when you're definitely going to want to make allowances with training in terms of how you approach it, how intense it is, that kind of thing. So leading on to that, like, what can you do? So first of all, like, take extra rest. Like, one missed session is not going to impact your physique. And it's not going to impact your progress, but 5 weeks of missed sessions due to injury, or, you know, not taking the extra rest and then being extra tired and then having no willpower and overeating as a result is also going to make a big impact on your physique not in the right way. So it's kind of like weighing up the pros and cons. Like, there are always going to be times when you need to prioritize sleep, and I would always say sleep needs to be like your number one priority alongside nutrition when it comes to weight loss. And that's probably even more important, like having adequate rest and catching up on sleep. If you haven't had a good night's sleep, giving yourself an extra lie-in is going to be more beneficial to your weight loss progress, because it's going to mean that your energy levels and your willpower aren't then also even more compromised than they already are because of the hormones, if that makes sense. Auto-regulate your training. So as I mentioned, like you can reduce the weight, reduce the number of sets. So if you've got 3 sets of some things, take it down to 2, and increase the weight. So if you've got a lot of strength-based sets, so the 6 to 10s or the 2s to 10s, and you've got a lot of strength-based stuff, that's going to mean that you need to be lifting very heavy. Don't do those. Like, lower the weight, so drop it down by like 10, 20 kilos if you're doing a deadlift, and go for higher reps. So go for more like endurance sort of training, but again, don't feel like you need to push yourself to failure. Like, you can take a little bit of a rest, and that is also a wise thing to do if you are at a higher risk of getting injured. So, as I mentioned, sleep. Like, people will notice, and this is definitely something I'm noticing this week, that sleep starts to really suffer around the PMS. And for me, like, it's definitely like in the couple of days before my period that I start to notice it. And like, some people will find that they really struggle to get to sleep because obviously they're more anxious than normal. Some people find their sleep quality suffers. They don't get to stay asleep for as long. I personally find that I wake up at 4 a.m. absolutely buzzing off my tits and like weirdly feel well rested, but know that by the time it gets to 3 o'clock, I'm going to be probably having a meltdown. But essentially, because of increases in progesterone, your sleep starts to suffer. So this, as I've mentioned, will increase your hunger even more. It will absolutely throw a bucket of cold water over your motivation and put willpower in the gutter. So this just further highlights the notion that, like, making sure you're prioritizing rest and feeling well rested whilst you're on your period is like really important, because it will directly impact your nutritional choices. You'll probably notice what happens, or what has happened to you in the past, is hunger has increased, willpower and motivation is shit. You then get pissed off at yourself because you're not resilient and consistent enough. You decide you're a failure, and then you opt for self-sabotage. So essentially, sleep and nutrition are interlinked, like they are symbiotic, and both of them are fundamental to weight loss success. So if you do need to make sure you're prioritizing an early night, not let anything come between you and your sleep routine, kick your partner into the spare room or go into the spare room yourself. Something that I have just found absolutely revolutionary, which I actually implemented when I was on my period and have now kept, is having your own duvet. Because I would get so fucking pissed off if Ryan was stealing the duvet, and I'm already irritable, I'm already tired, and I'm already pissed off because I can't get to sleep or I can't stay asleep. Since having our own duvets, I have consistently slept like a fucking log, even when I'm on my period or PMS, in my PMS phase. And it's because I'm not constantly being woken up every time the little bastard steals the duvet. So that is revolutionary. You can also use supplements like ashwagandha and magnesium to aid your sleep quality. So like how deeply you sleep when you do fall asleep. Give yourself a few extra lie-ins, but also, I know I've said like take rest around training. Don't be completely sedentary, because if you're sedentary, you're not going to sleep as well. So like, substitute your trainings for walks, essentially. Weight. So this is the big one, right? If your weight doesn't shoot up by 5 pounds, it might plateau. It will probably stay in the same place. It might go up by, mine can go up by 5 pounds easily. It might stay the same. It might not do anything. So sometimes it goes up, sometimes it stays the same. Both equally frustrating, both make you panic. On top of that, you also feel bloated and watery, so you assume that your weight going up is fat gain. You then feel like you're failing and you overeat, because you might as well, because the damage has already been done, because you've already gained fat and your weight's gone up. So what can you do? This is the biggest thing, right? Weighing yourself is not important. Like, as a coach, I actually don't give a flying fuck what you weigh. Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. It just means that you have a specific relationship with gravity. I know it's a lot easier for me to be like, I don't care what you weigh, when actually it's not, I mean, I don't care what I weigh, and it takes a little while to get to that point, but it's probably the least beneficial data that you can have because it is so impacted by so many things. Prime example being your period and PMS. It's essentially 2 weeks out of your month where your weight doesn't play ball, right? And I did a post on this recently, but the amount of times I've seen people give up because their hormonal weight fluctuations have made them feel like they're failing is absolutely criminal. It's literally, you may as well burn, how much is a week's coaching? Let's divide. You may as well burn 40 to 80 quid if you then have 2 weeks that you just absolutely sack off because your weight's gone up because you're in your period. You may as well, honestly, turn your heating off, set fire to 80 quid and use that to heat your house. So if it's pissing you off, don't do it. You wouldn't like deliberately walk into like a door every time you walk past it and stub your toe. Like, so why continue torturing yourself? Like, if you know that your weight is going to change when you're on your period, which 99.9% of the time it does, you may as well stop weighing yourself around that time. But also remember that you can use that information, that scientific information, that your weight is going to change in a way that you don't want to see it change around that time. So you can rationalize it, look at your weight graph, trends over time, look at the last time it plateaued and what happened after. I'm going to show you my client. Let me just pause, hang on. So yeah, I want to show you this weight graph, right? And basically, whenever you notice that your weight is plateauing, what you can do is look back at previous data and see what happened the last time it plateaued. Because, like, if you zoom out and look at this bigger picture, like, this is going to be the most important way of helping to rationalize what's going on. So for this client here, we can see it plateaued sort of around 13th of Feb for a couple of days, and then it came down again. Now, if we look back like to the previous, like 4 weeks before, so around the 14th of January, we can see it plateaued. It actually went up, plateaued a little bit, but then it came down. So, and again, if we look around the sort of 13th, 14th of December, we can see it went up. Obviously, there was a long break between Christmas and when she weighed herself again in the new year. But around that time, it actually sort of plateaued and then it went up again, right? It then went down and then obviously has continued going down. But the general trend over time, every sort of 4 weeks, you can see these spikes and plateaus. So if you're in a plateau, then what I would recommend doing is zoom out, look at your graph, look at your data, and work out if the same thing happened 4 weeks before, because I can absolutely tell you that it will do that. And if you give up here, right, if this client had given up at this point here, she wouldn't have gotten to this point, which is almost half a stone lighter, right? So, yeah, essentially, look at averages when it comes to your weight. Don't just look at what's happening on a daily basis. Look at what's happening across the week. Look what's happened over the last couple of months, and rationalise it. Look at what happened last time it plateaued and look at what's happened afterwards, i.e., it plateaued and since then it's come down pretty consistently. Remind yourself that it's normal. Remind yourself that it's temporary. Remind yourself that your weight is not a direct fucking correlation of your achievements, your character, your sense of self, any of that. Remind yourself that you would genuinely need to eat 3,500 calories on top of your maintenance calories. So that's not 3.5 calories total. That's on top of your maintenance calories. Let's say your maintenance calories are 2,000. So you're looking at 5,000 to 6,000 calories, and that's to gain 1 pound of fat, because 1 pound of fat is about 3,500 calories, right? So you would need to eat that on top of your maintenance calories to gain 1 pound of fat. So if your weight has gone up 5 pounds, you would need to be eating, let's say like your average is, your maintenance is 2,000 calories. You would need to eat 27,500 calories to gain 5 pounds of fat. Have you done that? Probably not. So just remember that. And when you're feeling shit, like focus on neutral or positive body recognitions or achievements, i.e., okay, I feel a bit bloated and gross, but you know what? Like last week I managed to PB deadlifts, or I might feel a bit gross, a bit bloated, but like I know it's because I'm watery. I know it's because I'm looking at my body through grey tinted glasses, and I know that last week I was actually really appreciating how my legs looked in these new jeans. Or rather than being like, I hate my legs, just be like, I have legs. Like, that's a neutral body recognition. Like, it's, I have legs. Like, you don't have to attach an emotion or an opinion to it. On the subject of emotions, so when you're on your period, essentially you gaslight yourself and you invalidate your own feelings because you're saying they're just hormones. And as a result, you're unable to ask for the support. Ask for or support yourself through that period of emotional turbulence, and then you punish yourself for being emotionally weak by sabotaging your diet. This is literally internalized misogyny. Like, you have been told that periods mean nothing and they're just hormones and that you should essentially man up, right? So you're invalidating your own emotions because you know it's hormonal. And yes, to a degree, you should be saying that I know these emotions aren't real. I know it is hormonally charged, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from the fact you're still feeling those emotions. So remind yourself that what you are currently experiencing is valid, but also that you are literally hemorrhaging from your uterus and it probably really fucking hurts and you feel self-conscious and it's generally a really shit situation. So call yourself out on your own internalized misogyny. You know, like, don't expect yourself to just man up because it's just hormones. Like, you feel how you feel, right? There's no two ways about it. Focus on doing activities that bring you genuine joy, and ideally, obviously, don't link those to food, because if you're trying to get out of an emotional eating cycle, you know, eating to make yourself feel better is not going to make yourself feel better in the long run. Do a paint by numbers, watch a film, you know, watch a easy series, watch Love Island Australia because that's fucking jokes. Cuddle your dog, do something that is going to bring you some joy that isn't obviously related to food. Make room for the emotions that you feel. Make room for the emotions that you feel, and don't attempt to find solutions or causes. You feel how you feel. If you can't work out why you feel sad, the reason is because you're on your period, right? But you don't need a reason to feel sad. Like, people are allowed to just feel sad. Sometimes it happens. You don't need to find a solution. You don't need to try and make yourself stop feeling sad. Like, you can do things that, like, you know, might cheer you up, but you don't need to essentially try to get yourself to stop feeling the way you feel. You just need to make room for those emotions, accept that they're there, wallow in that emotion. Like, genuinely, like, sometimes you do have to wallow in your own self-pity, right? And that's a sweet ass bath. Like, that's a nice bubble bath. And if you can do that, if you can make the space and sit with your emotions and don't feel the need to rectify them or justify them, those emotions will pass and you'll feel a lot better for feeling that emotion, because you're like, well, it's just an emotion. Remember that it's temporary, and remember, prioritize fact over opinion. So often when we're on our periods, we feel like we're shit, we're a failure, we're terrible at everything, we're bad people, terrible partners, terrible mothers, you know, terrible employees, colleagues, friends, like, just generally, you know, shit at everything. If you haven't got cold, hard facts and actual proof to back that up, that remember that is just an opinion of yourself. And of course, you are going to have a more negative opinion of yourself at that time. But just because you feel that way about yourself doesn't mean it's a fact. So yes, anyway, there you have it. Periods, and like, you can tell I'm passively aggressive at the moment. So hope you enjoyed this passive aggressive period webinar.